Hi, it's me, Elena Keyros, and I'm with Infertile Mama. That's the name of my channel. I'm not talking about you. I'm here with my friend Jay today. She is here to talk about something that I knew nothing about, and having gone through the journey of infertility and everything Josh and I have been through, I'm shocked to know that there's something I didn't know about, and that is secondary infertility. And so to any of you who have heard the term or never heard the term, and maybe you're having this happen in your life right now, we have a wonderful expert here to tell us her story and her journey and what she's been through, and tell us a little bit about that. So first of all, tell us what that means, secondary infertility.
So secondary infertility is when you've been able to conceive naturally, and then when you try to conceive again, it doesn't work out. For so many reasons that we'd be here for hours discussing just the possible reasons for infertility.
Right, okay. And I was reading into it a little bit, and age tends to be the biggest one, the biggest factor.
Yeah, usually if you're over the age of 30, oftentimes a doctor will say, oh, until you're 35 you're okay, but that age of 30 seems to be a good point to see that happen. And for me, that was exactly, I was over 30 when we tried to have more children.
Okay. So tell us about you and your husband. Now, how you met and how old you were. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. My husband is Brady, and we actually met online. I was 26 when we met, and he was 28. And we met in person and got married. And so I was 27 when we got married, and then he was almost 29 when we got married. And we initially didn't want to have kids right away. We used protection for a few months, and then we decided that we didn't want to prevent, not necessarily purposely try to conceive, but we didn't want to prevent. And so we actually got pregnant right away. And it was a hard pregnancy. I was very sick. I had to quit my job. I had bleeding that nobody knew what caused it. It was just kind of this up and down roller coaster the entire time. And then we had a planned home birth, but my son had actually passed away, and we didn't know. And so he was
how far along?
I was 36 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Two term. If he had lived, he would have been fine. But he had passed away. They're guessing between 5 to 10 days before, and so obviously we were devastated because it was a huge loss. And I've learned that a miscarriage or a stillbirth, there's no difference. It's still a huge loss. And you know, the only difference is that I had a baby to bury, where oftentimes with a miscarriage you have nothing, and that's a greater loss in some instances. So I was not going to get pregnant again. I was devastated, and I told my husband, I'm like, we're waiting at least 2 years. I'm not going to do this again. And God had different plans for us. And we actually got pregnant 2 months later.
2 months.
2 months later. No. So like, there's no way I was recovered.
Well, can I back up just a little bit? So when you found out that there was no heartbeat, did they induce you to deliver?
So we didn't know until I went into labor.
Oh, so you did go into natural labor.
So I went into natural labor and called the midwife over. She couldn't find a heartbeat. Okay. And I was already completely dilated. Oh, wow. So we pushed, and he was born, and he was perfect, except that he wasn't alive. Oh. And, you know, no one prepares you for that, because you figure once you get past that safe point in your pregnancy, where most pregnancies make it, there's no concern. But I've learned that's not the case. And so, you know, and there's theories about what caused it, but we don't know.
You just don't know.
We don't know for sure. We think possibly that we found out later that I have a genetic defect where I don't metabolize certain B vitamins, including folate. And so that might have caused it, but it's all hearsay. We just don't know.
Wow. Well, I'm sure. Sorry, that's a tough one.
It's tough.
You got to name him, and
yeah, and he's buried out in Enoch. So his name is Joseph.
Joseph. How sweet.
Yeah.
But you're not from this area originally.
No.
You're from back east.
Yeah, I'm from Washington, D.C. I was raised in the Northern Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C.
And Brady's from here.
He's from California, actually.
Oh, he's from.
So he's originally
East
from
Coast
Orange.
meets West Coast,
and we met in Utah.
Utah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Well, so am I.
Good. So after Joseph, then 2 months later, you got pregnant naturally. Well, beyond natural.
Beyond natural, because we were using protection.
You're using protection, and you got pregnant.
And I got pregnant, and I was not emotionally ready for that. Because I'm like, I can't do this again.
Just done it.
And it's oftentimes those, you know, I hadn't fully grieved, and then I was pregnant and terrified of being sick and having to quit my job and you know, all the things that had come with the first pregnancy. But with my second pregnancy, I wasn't sick. I didn't feel like I had to sleep all the time. And then I thought, this isn't going to last, because I wasn't sick and I felt great. And, but, you know, things carried on. I didn't have any, you know, unexpected bleeding. You know, things went through, and I was working with the same midwife. And she had been great with my son's birth. And so we stayed with her. And at 16 weeks, we got 2 heartbeats. And
oh my gosh.
I had a feeling, like just that feeling that there's something very different about this pregnancy. And so we got sent down to Las Vegas to have an ultrasound done. And at the ultrasound, we found out that we were having triplets.
Really?
And so
what a shock. You're not ready to.
There's no emotion to say this is how we felt.
Right.
It was
There's no word for it.
It was like elation with like being terrified and shocked and
trauma.
I didn't know anybody who had triplets.
I think you're the only person I know that has triplets.
Yeah, and we didn't even call the fertility clinic because I had friends who had gone through IVF, and we knew how much it was going to cost. And it wasn't
an option.
It wasn't an option.
And so no further than just the natural things that you had control of. You didn't do anything like Clomid.
Nope.
Nothing medically. And
no, we didn't do any medication, no insemination, because we didn't have the sperm count to even try to do an insemination. You know, they want you to have over 20 million sperm to do an IUI.
Yeah.
And he had 0, and you know, you shoot one in there and the chances are insignificant.
Anymore, I think with IVF, they actually inseminate the egg now. Or before, they just put them in a dish and hoped that one would crack the egg.
Yeah.
And that's what we went through. So it was just holding your breath and hoping that there was an embryo.
Yeah. And I have a stepsister who had gone through IVF because she has a genetic disorder that is very hereditary, and over 50% of her eggs would have the genetic disorder. And so she went through where they selected the eggs that didn't have it, and then went through that, and that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to get one baby.
Wow. Yeah, anymore with science, it's just out there.
Yeah, so there's so much that can be done, but then, you know, IVF doesn't always take. You know, you go through round after round, and
I'm a story there.
Yeah, you've done it
a few times.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you spend all that money, and yeah, so Month after month.
Month after month.
You had to live with that.
Yeah.
And you kind of did it privately. Like,
I didn't publicize it at all because not many people talk about it.
mm-hmm.
You know,
It's not something people just come and ask
it's not,
so.
you know, are you trying to get pregnant? That's very invasive.
I got that question a lot.
Oh.
But I didn't have children, and I think because you had 3 children, people just didn't ask you that.
Most people assumed we were done.
Yeah.
We had triplets. Mm-hmm. Most people assumed we used fertility,
mm-hmm.
and so they just no one had asked me after.
I know that I just assumed that you had your family and you guys were happy, and I knew you were in midwifery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so. And that was probably around the same time.
Mm-hmm. It was. It was exactly the same time. And that actually made it difficult.
Because helping children, seeing pregnant women, helping them have their babies.
Constantly around pregnant women.
Oh, that'd be so hard.
That was really hard. It was hard to, you know, sometimes it was hard to go to church when there was a new baby.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, why do they get to have a new baby and I don't get to have a new baby?
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel selfish because I already have 3 children. And
we're so hard on ourselves as women, aren't we?
I know, and it's this constant cycle. And, you know, and then it's the month after month going through the grieving process.
Yeah.
For 8 years.
Oh, 8 years, that's so hard.
You know, and my husband, he really wasn't interested in even really finding out what was going on. And he's like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And, you know, we don't need to mess with anything.
Funny how men can do that.
Yeah. You know, it's, you know.
As women, it's so hard.
Yeah. But, you know, he watched me go through it and going, you know, this is when the calendar says that we've got to do this. Yeah. And it takes all the romance out of it. Mm-hmm. It just becomes a very functional process.
Clinical process.
Yeah. Even
down
when
to
you're
the
not.
minute.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's time.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. And so who do you talk to?
It's true.
You know?
It's true.
You know?
But where you were in the field of childbearing,
mm-hmm.
didn't you feel like you had more colleagues that you could kind of open up to?
Well, I was working with a couple midwives, one who was a master herbalist. And so working with her, she gave me plenty of ideas. And I honestly never felt like the problem was me. Not that you can pass blame on anybody. But, you know, I assumed that because Brady had cancer that's what the problem was. And I remember at one point we had gotten a test from Amazon to see if he had enough sperm. It didn't give an amount.
You can do that?
Yes.
Wow, Amazon.
I know Amazon, you can do it all. Except for IVF. They might come up with that just one day. But yeah, we got a test and it said that it was below 20 million. And
so that's considered male factor infertility.
Mm-hmm. And so then we knew that was the situation, but we didn't know he had 0.
Right.
I think it was another 4 years after that before we did that. Yeah, but yeah, so I worked with a master herbalist. I did acupuncture. I chiropractic and diet and, you know, and then, you know, everyone always tells you, oh, if you're around a pregnant woman, you know, you're going to get pregnant. And I'm like, that's not how this works.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Oh my goodness. I'm like, being around pregnant women, you just get pregnant.
Contagious.
It's contagious. I'm like, that's not how it works. But yeah, no, but it was hard emotionally. And I think that was the thing that I didn't understand, was how hard emotionally it was. Because there were Sundays where I didn't want to sit in Relief Society.
Mm-hmm. And you want to be late to church on the first Sunday in case there's a blessing.
Oh, yes. I know, and yes, it's, you know, and with secondary infertility, it's this extra added guilt because you already have children.
So there's extra added guilt and there's extra added loneliness because you can't talk about it.
Yeah, because it's not like I can go to my friends who don't have children and say, I feel really bad because I don't have another child. It sounds very selfish and very inconsiderate of another person. And you know, my very best friend has not been able to have children, and I've seen the sorrow that she's had because she loves children, and they've chosen not to adopt. And you know, an adoption isn't the end all. No. It doesn't make it go away.
No, it doesn't.
And you know, but she and I have talked a lot, and to get her perspective of how difficult it is, really, I think for me, it made me understand that those feelings, every woman who goes through infertility has those feelings, and I shouldn't feel guilty because I have a desire to have more children.
Right.
You know, and I've had women who've never been able to have children tell me how selfish I was.
What?
Tell me how inconsiderate I was of their feelings. And you know, and what do you say when someone says that?
I know that when I was in the midst of it, I was, you know, the hormones made me crazy, and I remember resenting people with children. With children, I didn't know their story. I didn't know if they wanted more or if I didn't care. It was just in there, this resentment.
And I felt that too, and I had children, and then, you know, you have mom guilt because you have children, and mom guilt is awful.
Yes.
Even if you have the number of children you want. And then you add on top of this, it's the what should have been guilt. And it's the same, and not necessarily guilt that I feel with my son, but it's the what should have been grief that I feel with my son. You know, I see my daughters go through life
Stages,
and these milestones. And I didn't get to experience that with him, and so it's the grief of loss and the grief of infertility is very similar.
Interesting. Well, yeah, because when you can't bear a child, you can't carry a child. When you see other children going to kindergarten, learning, losing their first tooth, and every holiday, you feel grief.
Yeah.
Literally. There's loss and pain, sorrow. It's just there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point to put that together. You're grieving.
It's grief month after month after month after month, because you get your hopes up. You think you might be pregnant, and then you're not, and you do that over and over and over and over again. And then with a loss of a child, you do that over and over and over again. Every year, there's something.
They would have been the sage. They would have been.
And, you know, and then it's hard when you have children who want a younger sibling.
Yeah.
And you have to explain to the 4-year-old, I'm sorry. That's not how this works. You don't just order a baby from the store. And so,
well, Abby, we went through a lot with her.
Yeah.
And so when she wanted her sibling, we just told her, you know what? It's just the 3 of us, and you get all the attention. So just enjoy it. But she was just adamant, and she would pray. She would just pray that God would send us another baby. Yeah. And my heart would just break.
I know. I know. My girls did the same thing. They'd pray that mommy would have a baby in her tummy. And, you know, and you're just like, a parent wants to give their child everything. And no one tells you that the one thing that they want and you want, how hard that is to go through.
Together.
Yeah.
Those disappointments month after month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you seem to be on the healthy side of it. You've come through. Would you say so, or is it there?
It was a process. It was a process to get to where I was, where I am, I should say, and ultimately, what made it where I could be okay was actually when I had a hysterectomy.
Isn't that
which is so bizarre?
No, because it was the same for me.
could not, there was always that hope. And then when I later found out that my fallopian tubes were blocked.
Oh, really?
Because that's a test you can't see with an ultrasound. You have to do the dye.
Yeah.
And I later found out that my fallopian tubes were completely blocked.
Oh, wow.
But I had cysts inside of my fallopian tubes, and they would rupture. And it was kind of like experiencing an atopic pregnancy, because it would cause damage to the fallopian tubes each time that happened. And so, and I don't know if it's rare or not. I'd never heard of it, even in midwifery. I'd never even heard of it. But you know, I had a hysterectomy a year ago in May.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it just kind of made it, well, I'll never have to worry about hoping that that's going to happen.
That hope causes devastation.
Yeah.
And even when we got Abby, every time I had my period, I would still be completely destroyed. Yeah. And I'm like, why? When I have this precious baby that I've always wanted. And it wasn't until I got fixed that like an animal.
Nope, that's what we call it in our house.
I seriously, that was when it finally,
where
I was
you
at
could
a
be just like, go,
place.
Okay,
it's done. No more hope.
Yeah.
No more of this. And you know, I don't. It's crazy how that happens as women. That
and I was having severe perimenopausal issues on top of the cysts that were happening every few months. And so, you know,
Is that why you did the hysterectomy?
Yeah.
Is because of the perimenopausal issues?
Yeah, I bled for like 6 months straight.
Oh,
Didn't stop for 6 months.
Wow.
Like, I walked into the OR bleeding.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and that was after going back to school, and it was craziness. But having the hysterectomy actually made it that I came to terms with it and said, I can let this go finally. And I haven't had, like, I know a lot of women who have a hysterectomy go through a grieving period. I was done with my uterus. And I was done with the month after month grieving and the hormonal shifts and all of that went with it. And so for me, it was more of a celebration. And when I went to go see the doctor, I went determined that I was going to have a hysterectomy, because I was suffering because of my uterus. And you know, it wasn't very long after I had my hysterectomy that I was like, I feel like I can finally breathe about this, and it's not devastating anymore. So
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. In fact, we say that my hysterectomy was a good thing. It wasn't. It wasn't
I think
sad.
I would imagine people who grieve hysterectomies are the ones who never had infertility.
Yeah.
But they know maybe there's more babies and there might be some guilt or some grief that comes with that. But if you've suffered infertility, you've suffered.
Yeah.
You don't.
And
it's a relief to just come. It's acceptance, relief.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I would have never had closure with my infertility if had I just
not had a hysterectomy. I can understand that 100%. So for those watching who are like, oh, I didn't know there was a name for this. And they're going through the month after month and devastation. What is your advice?
That's a good question. Because infertility is something that there's no guidebook. There's no book that says, if this happens, you need to do this. And then there's the whole emotional side to it. And the reality is that you go through the grieving process.
That's good
and
advice.
And if you're prepared for it, when you see the blood or the negative on the pregnancy test, because everybody tests early because they think they might, you know.
That's right.
And you're not supposed to, but you still do it. And
Guilty.
the dollar store. I was a regular. But you know, it's knowing that there is a grieving process. And it's not that you're grieving an actual baby. You're grieving what should have been. And I think that's what makes infertility so difficult, is that you're grieving something that's not tangible, that's not physical in any form. It's that hope of the future that you didn't get.
I think that's good advice, because I think they don't know what they're feeling. Like, you don't, in the moment, you don't know. I remember working with someone at the bank who had a 10-year-old son, and she said, I feel guilty, like I'm wasting time, my energy on this want that I have, when I should be spending my energy with my son and enjoying him, being grateful for that I have him.
And I think that's the other thing, is that there will be guilt. There will be guilt because, especially with secondary infertility, because I have kids. I should be happy with that. But there's this, you know, for some women, having one child is all they want, and they're happy, and they'll never understand that feeling of wanting another child, and there's nothing wrong with that. But those women who do want more children, there's no emotional support for the trauma that you go through each month.
It's true.
And, you know, getting doctors involved in something that is supposed to be special and sacred becomes not.
It's a tricky thing, because you think, oh, why shouldn't there be a support group for infertility couples? But that was what I went to for adoption, and it was terrible. Like, that didn't help me. That didn't help me to hear everybody's sad story about wanting kids. And so it's almost like you have to kind of go through it alone, even though it's so lonely and painful. But I just can't think of anything that would help, other than knowing that there's other people that are struggling too.
And, you know, and I really didn't know anybody who was going through it at the same time, or I wasn't aware of it at the time. And I've discovered, for me, talking about it helps. For some people, it doesn't help.
Right.
And so, you know, I don't know, but I don't know if I would go to, like, an infertility support group either.
I know.
It just, I don't know. It's not appealing.
I learned the hard way. And it wasn't that I was seeking it. It just turned into that when we went to an adoption group meeting. And I thought, no, this is not helping at all. But it's a lonely journey for sure. What are some things that friends can do to make it a little bit easier?
I think that's probably the struggle, because it depends on where you are in the journey.
That's true.
Because there were times when I didn't want to go to church and see the babies being blessed, you know, and so, like, friends who knew were sensitive, and they wouldn't invite me to baby showers or, you know, things like that. But sometimes it hurt to not be invited as well, because I'm human. And so it's I don't know. It's one of those things of just being the friend that you've always been. Don't try to change the dynamics of your friendship just because there's infertility going on. You know, don't go ahead and invite. If they choose not to go, then that's their choice, and
Or at least you're not excluding them.
You're not excluding them. You just be who you've always been, and let them know that their worth doesn't depend on whether or not they have a baby either, because especially in our culture, children are a big part of the whole experience. And if you don't have children, that can feel very devastating. And so I think just making sure that people feel welcomed and included no matter what their state of motherhood is.
And I think too, people need to, and this goes just for in general, just having empathy, because I know that I let down sisters and sisters-in-law because I wouldn't go to blessings, you know, and to all the milestone events.
Yeah.
And they would get their feelings hurt and be upset and think that I was antisocial and I wasn't kind, and it was just such a heartbreak for me. I just couldn't emotionally bear it.
Yeah.
But they thought I was being selfish.
Yeah, and I think that's being gentle on both sides, being gentle with ourselves, those who are going through fertility, infertility, and those who are family members, is being gentle and understanding that the emotions that a person going through infertility is experiencing are unique. And, you know, not try to fix them, because that was the other thing.
We're broken.
Yeah, you know.
I always felt like I was broken.
Yeah. But, you know, it's, you know, and oftentimes I wouldn't talk about it because someone would find out that I was trying to get pregnant, and then they would be like, have you tried this? And, you know, and someone who has tried it all on the natural side of things, I was like, yeah, I've done it. And you don't want to be rude. And so you just, you know, you nod your head and say, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Oh my goodness. Well, Jay, thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
It was fascinating. And you have 3 beautiful girls.
I know.
And I'm so glad that you are in a healthy place.
Yeah.
With
infertility. It was a journey though. I mean, in the end, you know, it's 11 years since.
Long time.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm in a good place, and that's why I wanted to come talk to you, because I knew that there are women who are not in a good place, and it's hard to be in that place.
It is. It's a dark, lonely place to be.
Yeah.
So any of you out there right now, just know you're not alone, and everything Jay said, it brings hope to me, just seeing you and your family, and that you do come through on the other side, and it doesn't kill you, right? No. It feels like it.
It feels like it some days. You're not going to make it through, but the reality is you take it day by day, sometimes minute by minute, and you know, you push forward. I think my biggest regret was not living my life and feeling stuck in an infertility, and feeling devastated. So
I guess I could feel that way too.
Yeah, you know, it's the waiting, it's the hoping, it's the living for something that you don't have,
right? And
then feeling like you lost opportunities because of it. I think that's probably my biggest regret.
But it was a righteous desire.
Definitely a righteous desire. And I honestly, would I go back to myself at 31 years old and say, listen, it's not going to pan out, so just get over it? I don't know if I'd be who I am today if I hadn't gone through that.
I feel that way. Yeah. I feel like I'm grateful that I had that journey. As painful and horrible as it was. Yeah. I just remember the people that came kind of like angels that would come in and out of my life, just filter through, that I don't think I would have met or had the level of relationship that I had otherwise. Yeah, you know? Exactly. So, yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You've shared a lot of interesting and important things. Yeah. So I'm sure our viewers will be grateful too.
Well, I hope they learn something and are able to find what they need.
Right. If you have any comments, please feel free to comment, or you can email me privately at infertilemama@gmail.com. And thanks for watching.